So many things happened. This happened because of an accident. Yes, Abbot Ignatius was visiting one of our monks that was unconscious in Rochester, and he met Cardinal Concha, and that's where it started. It seems like it just by chance, but God runs history. He knows what he's doing.
You see, you have to see that God comes into many of these things. We had 3 monks of the same family, this one Skowski family, 3 brothers and 3 sisters who became Benedictine nuns. The 6 of them, along with their mother, made a trip to the East Coast by car. And all went well, and on their way back, they went first to South Dakota. The sisters stayed at their convent, and then, they traveled in 2 cars, and then traveling from Yankton, South Dakota to North Dakota to get back to the Abbey and to their work that they had there. And there was an accident, a head-on collision. Father George was killed, and Father Wilford was very badly injured and was taken to Mayo Clinic. And our Abbot Ignatius, went to accompany Father Wilford at Mayo Clinic, and that coincided with the visit of Archbishop Luis Concha, who went to Mayo Clinic for his medical checkups because he had a heart condition. So he met Father Abbot and this priest who was in a coma. And they had to talk about something. So that was at the time of Vatican II, when Pope John the 23rd encouraged all religious orders in the developed world to send 10% of their membership to work in the countries in development. And so he brought that idea up to Father Abbot Ignatius. He said, well, that sounds very good, but you will have to come and visit our monastery and talk to the monks, because I do not make a decision like that. The community, they make the decision. So he came to visit. For some reason or another, the monks thought this would be a good idea. That was in 1960.
The Benedictine values, I think, precisely are you might say, the spark of the whole thing. And to name a couple of them, one of the key ones, I think probably the primary one, is community. The sense of community, the people. There's a bonding there. It won't just be, I work in an organization and we see each other during the day, we collect our paychecks from the same place, but we tend to form a community. Community tends to form an environment, a place where peace becomes a reality. And not just in a very theoretical sense, but in a very real sense. The A monastic school is one that might say has the monastic community as its core. It's kind of like, say, the school is an orbit around the monastery. The monastery is the sun, you might say. The school is around it. The school never becomes the center in that sense. It's the community. In this case, it's the community that follows the rule of Saint Benedict. Discipline is really the value that says that I'm going to do or use the talents that I have in a way that's going to be not just whatever I feel like, but in a very organized way. I'm going to put them to use of other people. It ties in very much with the Order et Labora, but the thing is, you have a discipline, you continue to do something, and over the long run, the results are seen.
Our founder was from Einsiedeln Abbey in Switzerland. And as a young monk, his desire was to spread the order. And he heard about they had a mother house or a daughter house in Indiana, St. Mildred, and one in Arkansas, St. Benedict's. And he wanted to work over here. And so he came over right after he was ordained. Didn't tell his family until his first Mass sermon. He got his taste of missionary work then. Helped with one of the Indian missions at an Indian school in Yankton. And then in, I think, 1889, he was named pastor at Devil's Lake in the northern part of Dakota Territory. In the 1880s and 1890s, a lot of Germans from southern Russia began to immigrate into North Dakota. They were basically ethnic Germans who had been in Russia since the 1700s. This parish here in Richardson, German-Russian parish, had been started as a mission of Dickinson. But the priest there was Irish, and they wanted somebody who could talk to them in their own language. And in 1899, he came down here with a few monks, and they lived in the parish house. And that summer they started building the first wing of the monastery, East Wing. And they got the building finished in December, and they moved in around Christmas time.
This building was built in 1910. That was shortly after finishing the construction of the church. And it was to be a central heating plant and some shops. It begins with a room filled with tanks, water supply for all the campus, all the buildings was from there. And then next the heating plant, which is coal boilers. They generated their own electricity for many years. And supplied electricity for the town. And now we've converted this to shop area, kind of working area. Farther over is a room that we call a carpentry shop. Originally was a print shop. And they printed a newspaper here with, and I think it was called the Volksfreund. This was kind of the main part of the powerhouse when it was built in 1910. But here in North Dakota, heating is a big thing. It can be a big expense and very important. I have the record sheets. I have the records yet when it was installed. And now with the chemical and all in our boiler, in our water, we just keep it running. You know, here we are so many years later. I mean, the boiler that was manufactured before I was born, which was 1945.
So my ancestors came in after 1890. One group, 1893, and my grandfather was in the Russian army 5 years. When he got out of the Russian army, then he came to America immediately. So both sets of my grandparents got married in North Dakota, and then my parents are first generation Americans. My dad was the firstborn baby in the family. He was born 1900, and my mother was born 1902. I've been at the Abbey since 1957, and I started working on the Abbey farm in 1960. I worked on the farm for 52 years, and I was in charge, most of those years I was in charge of the Abbey farm.
One of my mother's sisters was a Benedictine sister, and she would come to visit us, once in a while, and she would tell me about their life in the convent and the work she was doing. And I found that very interesting. As I mentioned earlier, our pastor in our parish was a Benedictine monk. So we heard a lot about the monastery and about his life, etc. I grew up on a farm where I was born on the farm, about 25 miles from the monastery. When I was 5 years old, I began grade school at St. Clement's Parochial School. It was a school of the parish out in the country. Our teachers were the Sisters of Mercy, who came from Ingenbo, Switzerland. So after that was finished, I came up here to Richardson in September of 1949 and entered the high school here at the monastery. High school was very interesting for me. I was able to do a lot of work in music, which was my interest at the time. And I continued studying piano. I began studying piano when I was 5 years old. Here at the Abbey, we had an orchestra, and most of the members in the orchestra were monks from the Abbey here. And there was a band also. In the orchestra, I played the viola, and in the band, I played the snare drum. I was a baterista. So anyway, I enjoyed life at the school here. So those were my days here in high school. When I finished high school, we had the junior college, and I did 2 years of junior college here. And then I entered the monastery.
Yes, I was born southeast of Bismarck, which is between Napoleon and Linton in a rural area. I was raised on a farm, and my parents had 9 boys and 2 girls. I'm number 5. My parents are Germans from Russia, and we were German speaking as we were growing up on the farm. I learned English as I was going to school. After going to a country grade school, I came to Assumption Abbey here for high school in the fall of 1958. And I went through high school here and 2 years of college. And then in 1963, I joined the monastery. Father Sebastian was my biology teacher in high school, and Father Francis was my choir teacher. Sebastian was challenging. Biology and mathematics are not my strong point, so he was challenging. And Father Francis in music, he also was challenging, but he's always kind and understanding.
Mi historia comenzó en un pueblo y una parroquia dirigida por los benedictinos. Por eso soy benedictino. Yo llegué a la abadía en 1960 para estudiar en el college y mi noviciado en 1963 a 64. Hice otros en el 1964. O sea, llevo como 51 años como benedictino.
It was meant to be a school for the upper class in Colombia which could compete with the other upper class schools, which were international schools, sponsored by international governments, so that the Catholic Church would not lose the leadership among the elite of the Colombian people, no?
Yeah, I went to Colombia in 1975. The abbot at the time, Abbot Robert, asked me to go because the monks, well, they had come, Father Lawrence had come to the end of his time as prior. He said he would no longer accept the job as prior anymore. He thinks it was time for someone else to come. The abbot asked me to go there. Well, I was the youngest one in that whole community when I went, and it was a real shock to me that he asked me to go. I knew 2 words of Spanish, sí and no. And I said, sí.
It's sort of, for me at that time in my life, I have to admit there was somewhat of an adventurous spirit for me. But basically, you know, it was like God calling me to do something different.
Monsignor Vargas wanted to have boys and girls. We said, no, it's not going to be a base big enough for our school to grow.
It was Monsignor Carlos Vargas who chose the first students. It was he and Cardinal Concho who urged parents of the elite in Colombia to send their children to our school. From the class of leaders in Colombia, about the first 240 students that we had were chosen largely and brought to San Carlos by Monsignor Vargas. And one of the things that assured was that there was going to be a financial basis for building a school, because we had parents who would be willing to do what they had to do to make sure that the school would succeed.
We were simply swamped with things that need to be done.
We built this place, we came out here, cornfields. The first year we were out here in 1963, we lived in improvised classrooms with walls of plywood, and by the end of the year they were filled with green moss and mold and masses in the corridors, and the students aguantando todo, no? It was just they growing with us.
I had a brother that got married about at age 50 for the first time, so did his wife. I called them to Sacramento, California. Come down and help us. We need all the help we can get. And just like that, they decided to drop everything. Came down for 4 years. It was marvelous.
Our idea was that not only should the leaders of tomorrow, the Catholic leaders, be of a certain class, but they should also be of a class that was truly capable of being leaders, not simply because of the families they belonged to, but because of the intellectual preparation and gifts that they brought to society after they graduated from college. And then when we accepted the next class of Quinto Elemental, which was in 1961, at the end of 61, when we accepted them into school, they were now the best 60 out of 100 and candidates. And they turned out in 1968 to be a very fine graduating class.
I was the teacher first year of the sophomore students. I had 8 hours a week with one group and 8 hours a week with the other group. When the new school was built, there were no lights in the school, in the classrooms. The floor was just cement floor, and after the first year and a half, holes started to develop in the cement on the floor, and you would see the reinforced bars, steel bars that would come up. And then when it rained, you had to really talk loud so the students would hear you. And then if the hail came down, then you just stopped talking at all. The students just relaxed, visited together, and it was different. It was a very simple school, but somehow it didn't hurt to have a very simple thing and starting out with the school, just a wonderful place to teach.
It just all fell into place. Some power enables this to happen.
I've heard that many times from graduates and from the teachers in San Carlos. So I have to take it from their word that they in their life have benefited from going to Colegio San Carlos, and that they are willing and eager to share what they have learned there, again, especially the values.
I can say in my last 2 years at San Carlos, I had 2 of the very best years ever in my teaching.
Father Francis contributed an awful lot because he became a stabilizing force. You know, let's face it, there are very few institutions that have someone at the helm for 49 years.
I'm just surprised how the school has exploded with talent from Colombia. And all we did was to do our assignments such as we thought we were asked to do it. But it's been a great experience.
When he came to the office the morning after he arrived, I said, "What do you want here?" And he said, "I came because I was sent."
I think Father Francis Wary is going to be the greatest champion that North Dakota has produced. Yes. It's just, I didn't want him to come down to Bogota because he knew no Spanish, but he came down, and God wanted Father Francis to be there for 49 years. It's an incredible story. You have great people in Colombia. Be proud of them, period.
It's Colombia, not Colombia. That's good.
It comes back to me sometimes, like when you mentioned the desks. I did do quite a bit of work on those desks, a lot of welding.
Did they put their hands up and go like this?
Muy bien, San Calista. Thank you.
I said much more than I intended to.